like them when they're over.
Tom Freston, welcome to the show. Very excited to have you. We have an excuse to have you because Unplugged Adventures from MTV to Timbuktu, the memoir. Tom, I met you a long time ago and was impressed by what I knew about you then. But then I read this book and didn't realize that you were the kind of Zelig of media in the 20th century. And it's literally from Timbuktu. I mean, I'm reading this book and it's like he's going to get kidnapped by Al-Qaeda. He's got a clothing brand in Afghanistan. The Taliban is involved. And then Vice somehow at the end of it. Why did you decide to just put it all down now?
Well, it kind of was a pandemic thing. I always thought I had a bunch of stories. And then I did a podcast with this guy, Bob Lefsetz. And he pulled all these stories out of me, and I said afterwards, I could sort of link these together and make them into a memoir. People would encourage me. You should write a book. Everybody hears that. So I did. And I slimmed it down, and here it is. Comes out November 18.
And, I mean, people know you most, I would say, from MTV, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that that's your...
Definitely.
That's your legacy. The thing that I see that there's the thread through this, there are people that have extraordinary success in their life, which you obviously have had. You also had an amazing amount of fun. I mean, the MTV chapters are like, man, I wish I was there. Vice was fun for me. Your version of that was MTV. Talk a little bit about that time when you guys were building this from nothing. $35,000 a year was the top salary of all the guys that are putting together MTV. Like, talk about that beginnings of this amazing phenomenon that you were partially responsible for.
Well, it was definitely another era. I mean, so we're talking 1980. There's 3 television networks and PBS. Everything's kind of boring. And cable TV is just starting. The only place cable really exists is, out in rural areas where they had bad signals.
Yeah.
And at one point, CNN, ESPN, USA Network, we're starting sort of the tip of the sphere. There's going to be cable programming. The idea was it's going to replicate what happened to AM radio. Yeah. With FM, they're specialized. There's going to be these specialized channels going to specialized audiences. The day of the broadcaster is over. It's now the era of the narrowcaster.
Yeah.
And, so you could have a business off on the sidelines that would be sort of impervious to supply and demand, doing one thing all the time.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be head-to-head like ABC and NBC.
And you're how old at this time?
I'm the oldest guy there on a team of 6 or 7. I'm 33, and I just got back from 8 years in India and Afghanistan. And the criteria to get hired was you couldn't have any experience in television. So that's how loose it was. No one knew anything. Which, by the way,
not to, again, tie back to something that I know in my experience with you at Vice, is that was also the requirement of being on camera at Vice, was you couldn't have actually had any experience being on camera before. I mean, that's the kind of a specialty of the people you're around, is inexperience becoming kind of a virtue.
Exactly, because, in our case at MTV, it was like we couldn't afford to make stuff like, if you were a producer at NBC or CBS, we just can't afford to do stuff that way. You're going to have to figure out something new. But the comparisons to the early cultures at Vice and MTV are very appropriate and accurate. They're quite similar in a way. So it's a bunch of zealots on a mission. They're on a crusade. Money doesn't matter. Yeah. Nobody's there to want to sell the company to Google or something like that. It was like, we're on a mission. We were on a mission to take this new musical invention and sort of sweep the nation. And when it came around to me, I wanted to kind of sweep the world with it. But it was loose and fun. This was, we'd have wild parties. It was a wild place. And I found that very enjoyable. I had come from 8 years in India and Afghanistan, which was extremely wild. So I was living kind of low to the ground, and so sort of used to eccentricity and passion, and used to being humbled. So all of those traits worked out well for me working at MTV in this environment with a lot of people who, they were only into one thing, music.
Yeah. I mean, you say India and Afghanistan. I mean, the story of you going on that journey. And I think it's funny because a lot of young people, even sort of people in their 30s and 40s now, would associate Afghanistan only with the Taliban, right? With extremism, with war and terrorism. Whereas when you are set off on what was then called the hippie trail, right? It was a place to kind of find yourself, right? Going through India, it's a kind of a Maharishi vibe going through. But the interesting thing about it is you're pretty clear about this, is you're not that much of a seeker. You're a businessman there, right?
Yeah, I was seeking, but yeah, I was a businessman. I mean, back then, that was like the sort of the height of India as a spiritual destination.
Yeah.
People would go there, to find themselves and live in a cave over the Ganges with some sadhus. And it was also described to me once as, you got to go. It's the greatest show on earth, which it turned out to be. And on the way going overland, if you were hitchhiking, whatever, there was Afghanistan. Then 11 million people. India was like almost 600 million. So it was like a small place, but it had never been colonized. People had this kind of great spirit about them. And the tourist posters, for the few tourists there were, said, visit Afghanistan and see the world's friendliest people. Like, no one would believe that today.
No, I mean, it's the opposite.
But if you were there then, you did.
Yeah.
I was there for the tail end of what Afghans would now call the golden age.
Yeah.
Under the King Zaire Shah, there was like 50, 60 years of total peace. There was an excitement that they were coming into the modern world. They were going to try and fuse some levels of modernity with an Islamic culture, and it was exciting to be there.
But that was before, you didn't feel the kind of Islamist presence in any way there.
There wasn't.
There wasn't one.
Tribally,
maybe.
Radical Islam had not really arrived on the scene.
Yeah.
They were very tolerant and open. They loved foreigners. I mean, part of the Pashtuns, they had this thing called Pashtunwali, which was if you see anybody, no matter what their religion, you bring them into your home, you feed them before you even feed yourself. Hospitality.
Yeah.
Was a big trait, and I saw that firsthand. No one ever felt in danger there.
Yeah.
Even though people were carrying around rifles, they were single shot old infill rifles from
bolt action guns.
Yes,
yeah.
They were.
Yeah.
But you never felt danger. You never could have imagined that there would be a 40-year period of wars.
Yeah. In this time, and I say this, that you're not a seeker. I mean, everyone is a seeker in a certain sense, right? But not in the sense, I mean, you look at the photos in the book and you're like, geez, Tom's like in his hippie phase here. But you have this kind of duality where you're a business guy. I mean, we've later reading in the book that, you're trying to get out of Vietnam by doing an MBA. You're like, what the fuck is an MBA? Do I need this? It's like, well, yeah, not to get killed in the jungles. I need it. But you start a clothing company. And when you look at the pictures, see where you are, the hippie trail, I'm like, is he going to, reference what writers? Friedman. You're talking about Milton Friedman. And Rand. I mean, I'm a libertarian, so I was very excited about that. I was like, I didn't know Tom was a Friedmanite like me. But that's a funny thing, that you're there, and in the back of your brain in some ways is that everything is kind of an opportunity.
Well, I also was very caught up with the beat literature.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those two camps, while you never see them hanging out together, they did agree on a lot of things, which was freedom and experience. Free markets was more the...
Jack Kerouac ended his career in life writing for National Review. It's true.
Yeah. So, freedom was in the air in the late 60s and 70s. I'm really a child of that. And I realized early on that I didn't want to live a mainstream life. I thought a life would be more interesting out of the mainstream, on the edge. Yeah. And with the ascendancy of the counterculture, I used to look around and say, what the hell am I going to do? What's an alternative way of making money and surviving? And what I've found, I love living, I love the excitement of feeling so alive and vivid in Afghanistan and India. How could I afford to stay here? In those days, you couldn't get a job. They didn't have jobs there, so you had to create your own thing. So
it wasn't expensive to live there, right?
No, I mean, hotels were like $1-2 a night. It was ridiculous. And you could actually hitchhike for free, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
You could live for years on a small sum of money. But I wanted to stay there and build a business. And the business, which was originally to fund my further travels and immersion in this place, turned into be a bonanza. So I built sort of a little empire that...
With clothing, right?
Yeah, and clothing. We would design and make clothing to sell to better stores, not like sort of your cheap mass market ethnic goods, but we sell to Bloomingdale's and Bendel's and higher end boutiques. And I hired designers. I had a house in India. We had a design studio. We had showrooms.
A nice house in India, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a nice house with like all these servants, and I was living like a pasha in Greater Kailash.
Pasha Freston making clothes. And then, of course, the reason that you have that residual Friedmanite free market thing is the thing that comes and bites you in the ass, much like it's resonant today. Tariffs from the Carter administration literally destroy your business.
Yeah, I mean, we found our way through blackouts, cobras, dysentery, all these horrible things.
Administration.
And then in the end, on one hand, in Afghanistan, Afghanistan turns communist.
Yeah,
and whoever knew there was like 3,000 communists in the country, whoever never even thought of that happening.
Yeah.
It was the last country in the world to ever do that, to give it a shot. And then in India, where most of my business was, the Carter administration, under pressure from domestic manufacturers, put an embargo, not just a tariff, but they came out one day and said, okay, no more imports from India of clothing. Yeah. And you go, whoa, that, all of a sudden you're out of business. I have great sympathy for all these people today, small business people who are suffering with these increased tariffs, because they also had no notice. Some bureaucrats in Washington say, starting tomorrow, you're going to have to pay another 50% duty on your goods.
But you point out something that's really interesting that people often forget is that what tariffs and this kind of protectionism encourages graft and corruption, because the people that take in India these slots are people who are connected to the government, as you point out.
Yeah, people paid for a while after the embargo was lifted. They were going to have a system of quota, so X amount of things could go out. So the big guys buy the quota, and little guys. I was a little guy. I was one of the only foreigners doing this. Yeah. We got X'd out. So I ended up smuggling clothing into the United States. If you can believe it, right? That's a low. Talk about a low state in life. But I'm thinking, we had this big promotion with Bloomingdale's coming up. It's going to be the biggest thing in the history of my little empire. And I said, wow, I'm not only going to be deep in debt and bankrupt, but I'm going to blow this opportunity. So I knew all these smugglers. Back then, there was a lot of people smuggling dope, Yeah. And I used to figure if these goofballs could do that, I could do it. So you could still, I shipped 3 tons of clothing to Montreal, where I knew a guy, to Montreal, where you could still import things from India, and then smuggle it across the St. Lawrence Seaway through the Thousand Islands. Oh, yeah. And I'm thinking, this is no way to run a business.
No way. I mean, you can do that maybe once.
I did it once. And then I said, well, it was kind of fun, because how easy it was.
Yeah. So can we make a very long connection and say that the protectionism of Jimmy Carter helped create MTV in your career? Because you abandoned that career, right?
It was abandoned for me.
It was abandoned for you because of that regulation. That might have been, you might have been the clothes kingpin, but you become a media
never
kingpin.
really want to be a huge garmento, but I did love my life. I was living like, I went everywhere. I'd been to every state in India. I've been all over Southeast Asia, and I just loved living there. And I imagined this was going to be the life for me. My whole life has been sort of improvisation, like it's much of a jazz routine. So I ended up. I had to quit it. There was no future in it. So I ended up by happenstance at MTV.
You come back. I mean, that's a pretty different life, right? I mean, living in Manhattan in 78, 79, 80, around that, which is a different city than it is now, But the motivating thing for you is you love music, right?
I love music, and also I had always kept a place. Yeah. I had a small place in Manhattan because I would come back 2, 3, 4 months a year, depending on the year.
And you could do that then.
And I mean, New York was like a, battleground.
Yeah.
That was, we might be heading there again.
I think you might be right.
But yeah. But I love music, and I said I wanted to do something. What else can I do that I really loved? I loved traveling, and I didn't love making clothes, but I got to be successful at it. I love music. My brother was in the record business. He worked at CBS Records. He Billy Joel and Boston and all those kind of acts. So I used to look around. I said, "Man, this looks like easy kind of work." These guys I would get tickets to all these shows, Bruce Springsteen, but I love music, and I had an encyclopedic knowledge of it. That was the thing also that I loved. So
I love the little details in this book that you saw Bruce Springsteen in those famous shows at the Bottom Line.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and that's an incredible.
Two of them, I saw.
Two of them, yeah. And incredible time to be here. But the thing about MTV is not only are you working in the business, but you end up setting the tone for music and for popular music for, a decade plus to come, because that is the influence the MTV ends up having on the culture. What was, you said the goal was to get this out there and like build this business. Did you have any anticipation of how much the market wanted this and wanted to be fed music videos to kind of change the way that people thought about music at the time? I mean, it really did set the tone of everything.
Well, we were a culture leader for really the last quarter of the 20th century, up until 2000, early 2000s, when the digital revolution kind of supplanted the TV revolution, or began to. We all knew we were all the early team. We all knew this would succeed, although everyone we had to deal with thought it wouldn't. So it was, but we thought that the music video format that we had, music videos as that are irresistible to people who are music fans, and we had early evidence of that, and we just had to overcome a lot of business barriers. But in terms of, did we know we were going to impact other businesses like movies and advertising and go on, and politics? No, we didn't think we'd be that big. Did we think we'd be the first worldwide television network? We didn't imagine that at the beginning, but we knew we would be successful. And
what was the moment where you realized, I mean, because you talk about this in the book, and anybody who knows the history of this is aware of this, that getting into markets is nearly impossible in some ways because, as you say, it's in Tulsa. These places that are networked and wired because it's long distances. So I Want My MTV, which everybody knows from the sarcastic Mark Knopfler and Dire Straits song, is that people were saying, I want my MTV because they didn't have access to it, right?
Right. Well, it was being legitimized in that campaign by these rock stars. So if Mick Jagger and Pete Townsend and Hall & Oates are saying, call your cable company and say, I want my MTV. I want to get this, man.
Which they didn't necessarily feel, because you were stalking them, Tom.
Yeah. They didn't even know who we were either.
Yeah. Talk to me about this. One of the things that is like, I wish I had lived the life of Tom Freston. How do I replicate the life of Tom Freston? Which is what you feel throughout this book, by the way, is you're in Switzerland skiing. Tell me about that, because that is, you're trying to get I Want My MTV on camera.
Well, I was there stalking David Bowie. I wasn't skiing.
Yeah,
he was. But our situation was we were stalled. We had like 2 million homes in places like Tulsa. No one in New York or LA had it. No one even worked there ever saw MTV. And this went out, shot up in the space and came down, and we would watch on 3/4-inch videotapes. Mm-hmm. So the cable operators didn't want to put us on because we were going to cut into their profit margins. No one was going to watch music on television. Screw these guys, bunch of long-haired hippies, and who needs it? But we knew from those markets like Des Moines and Wichita and Tulsa that if we were in a market, the ones we managed to get in, those few, people loved us. Young people loved us. It's easy to forget how revolutionary MTV was back then. I mean, now it's like part of the wallpaper. Now it's gone, but so much has happened. But then it was a whole new sort of visual style, and it was a whole new format, and people got really excited about it. So we knew if we could get those people, if we could get people in these areas that didn't have it to demand it, this is a cool thing and you don't get it, we could win out. And the way to do that was I Want My MTV, which we ripped off. We like to rip things off. We ripped off from I Want My Mapo, which was a baby boomer campaign from the, go over the heads of the parents, go right to the kids, and draw the product through the distribution line. So we hired this guy, George Lois, who's this really iconic, wild advertising man right out of Mad Men, madder than the Mad Men. Yeah. He said, you fucking got to get Mick Jagger. So we'll get, because he had done it once for Maple. We got Will Chamberlain, Mickey Mantle, so forth. So we got Mick Jagger and Pete Townsend. I was assigned to get David Bowie. I called David Bowie's manager, and she
It's
said,
the best assignment, by the way. I love Jagger, but the best assignment is Bowie.
Yeah, Bowie is the one who really had it for me. I mean, so she said, well, David's skiing. I had met him once because he was the first guy we ever got, and that was only because I personally saw him, who give us permission to use his photos, like to put them on a piece of, some advertising. He said to me, is this good for music? Yeah. He didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So he'll do it. So now he'll do I Want My MTV, but he's skiing in Stade, the real, high-end ski resort in Switzerland. So we got the crew, 35 millimeter. We get on the plane to Zurich. Then we get on a train to Stade. We get there. We set up at the bottom of this remote hill. David's in great form. He's in his Let's Dance phase. Healthy and skiing, and he knew
blonde and
he
cool
comes down the hill and he'll ski and stop and say, I want my MTV, and then in post we put the logo in there and everything. So we did a few runs, and it was pretty simple. He was happy to do it, and he said, well, what are you doing for the rest of the day? Why don't you come skiing? So then at the end of the day, it was like, what are you doing tonight? Well, nothing. I've now peeled away from the crew. Well, you want to take a sauna at the Palace Hotel, which is like the Grand Dame Hotel in Stade. So, yeah. So I go back to the place we're staying, which is some dump. It's like a youth hostel. And I tell the crew, David Bowie just invited me to take a sauna with him at the Palace Hotel. I'll see you losers later.
I hope you didn't punctuate it by calling them losers, because
we probably couldn't do that today.
You're gonna hate crime.
I said it in a funny way. So I go there and meet him in the spa, and get a towel on. We go into the steam room in the sauna, and there's nobody there, but there's one other guy there, and he's sitting on a bench up in the top. It's sort of layered, and I squint through the steam. It's Paul McCartney. For God's sake, I'm in a sauna now with David Bowie and Paul McCartney, and it's me. This like
the setup of a joke.
This wuss from MTV. They've never heard of it. Paul McCartney. What is this MTV thing? So we sat around and through the shit. They made it really nice. I was just teeming with gratitude, and I'm saying, what am I? Here I am out of nowhere. Like a year and a half ago, I was living
Connecticut.
Kid from Connecticut, just right out of New Delhi. In Kabul, and I'm not hanging with these guys.
It's not either. You're hanging with David Bowie and Paul McCartney in his steam room in Stade.
Yeah, just the three of us, and we're all in towels, throwing water. They want to know what books you read, what's going on, interesting conversation. Paul McCartney's like the nicest guy.
Yeah.
And Bowie is too.
Yeah. And he was an incredibly smart guy and very literary guy, and
always want to know what books you're reading.
Yeah.
What about
if you
what
haven't,
authors do you like?
There was not long before he died. There's a list that I think he did for Vanity Fair or something, of a list of David Bowie's 100 books. Yeah. And it's really good. It's like he has very, very good taste. But at that moment, you have to realize that Tom Freston has become a different person, just outwardly, in the sense that that's not something that 99.99% of the population can ever even get close to, is sitting in the sauna with these guys in Stade. I mean, this is a new life for you.
And pulling it off. They didn't say you're like some kind of yo-yo.
Yeah, not embarrassing yourself.
But it was all part of a confidence building thing. When all those years I lived close to the ground in Asia, or traveling or working there, it was all about building confidence in my mind. I figured I can go anywhere. I can do anything.
You had that confidence
at
that point.
I can deal with rock stars. Yeah. I could do this, and so that was a good thing for me. But that was a real. Was
that something you felt like you had to do? It's like maybe I'm a little shaky on the confidence, or it just happened.
It happened. Well, you're always nervous when you start something new.
And you say, I'm good at this,
and then you say, I can do this.
Yeah,
I can do this. I realize we can take MTV anywhere in the world. A lot of people didn't have that international orientation. We can do it, particularly when governments began to open up to satellite and cable, which was just happening then, deregulation.
Just happening, yeah.
So
I lived in Sweden, and I think it was 90 or 91 that some Swedish businessman started broadcasting into Sweden from the UK that had deregulated satellite. It's like, you can't stop us now. And then all the private channels opened up across Europe, and then you guys exploit this, right?
It's funny. That's how things would open up. Some guy would put in a satellite, said that's the way it happened in Asia. A satellite would come in, all of a sudden there's these other choices, and people are haranguing their local government, and open up. Why don't we have more choices?
It's incredible. I mean, you're chasing down David Bowie, and chasing down Mick Jagger, but I mean, the other part of this, of building a huge business like this and a successful business, is just battling governments everywhere you go and battling regulations and people putting these roadblocks in for various stupid reasons. I mean, that seems to have been...
No one wanted to do business with it. The advertisers said, no one's going to watch you. The record company said, screw you, you know, got to pay us a lot of money.
The record companies didn't realize how much of a boon this would be to their
They said,
bottom
well,
line?
you're going to do this, you got to pay me a lot of money. And we'd say, hey, we're going to run like 3-minute commercials for you.
They wanted you to pay them to run commercials for their bands.
Yes.
Oh.
What
You never did, though, right?
We did in the end, but in the beginning we got them for free because our parents at the time were Warner Communications,
Yeah.
who owned 3 big Warner, Atlantic, and Elektra, and David Geffen actually he was
Yeah.
the first guy who says he was smart, take my videos, yeah, play them because I'll sell a lot of records.
Yeah.
In the end, we thought it was only fair, since we're minting money, we would help fund the production of these videos, since they were making more of them, and in exchange for the funding we would take some form of exclusivity. So we did output deals, which, you know, gave them some money and gave us the ability to say, hey, we're paying you, we're sort of partners at this now, and 2, allowed us to fend off competition.
Yeah. And talk about that ideas that you have that go beyond the videos, right? I mean, you start with Trevor Horn and the Buggles and Video Killed the Radio Stars, everybody knows. And, you know, you're doing, I mean, amazing thing that you point out in the book is printing schedules in magazines for when Thriller is going to be played at the top. It's like, this is the schedule of Michael Jackson. In creating, I mean, that record is a perfect record in so many ways. It's so good. I mean, but MTV is the midwife of the success of that record. But then a little later, you start doing TV shows that are not necessarily music, and it becomes a slightly different thing, right? When you're doing, you know, I mean, we have a Secretary of Transportation who apparently is going to come on the other show they're doing and say, oh, he used to be on The Real World. It's like the impact. The Secretary of Transportation was on The Real World. That's probably why he's there.
I can never see that guy on TV now without thinking about he's on the Road Rules.
Road Rules or whatever. But he married the woman from The Real World.
Yes.
It's like,
he's a reality TV guy. He's part of Trump's cast of reality show characters.
I know. Are you partially responsible for this reality boom?
Well, you know, the reality boom started with The Real World.
Yeah.
That was the first real reality show of
The Real World in New York? Was it 80?
Real World was in New York on Broome Street, on Prince and Broadway. And that started, well, look, around 1986 or 7, we saw the bloom was coming off the rose a little bit.
Yeah.
On music videos, remote controls were now popular, so if you didn't like a video, you were out of there. Plus, the creative cadre at the company was getting a little more ambitious. Hey, we could stretch out. We've been doing news and short form stuff, but we could do more stuff. And we figured out we could be a bigger place if we just took, say, 10% of our schedule. That's 16 hours and be about some of the things that music's about. We could take a page from Rolling Stone. We can't just rely on the vitality of the music business. And there's more we could add in. Fashion, eventually politics, movies. So
you did House of Style.
With Cindy Crawford. We hired Kurt Loder. We built up a news
very dear
operation.
friend of mine, Kurt. Yeah,
Kurt's great.
He's a lovely guy.
And we, built up a news operation. People wanted to know this stuff, and it all worked. And we would go on locations, and did spring break, and the ratings went through the roof, and we made ourselves a bigger place. But we were still about music first, second, and third.
Yeah.
Now what's happened? That was like. It's like heroin in a way. Subsequent administrations found out, because whenever you put on anything other than a music video, in the envelope of MTV, if it was good, ratings would be substantially higher. And then our advertising, when you're part of a public company, they want you to grow a tree to the sky. Basically, every quarter you got to be up. So right now I look at MTV, which I don't. It's just a repository of reality shows. They even saw it off the music television on the bottom of the logo, so they're not even about music anymore. Yeah, I thought. Yeah, I went on a personal strike when I saw that. That's like really a sin. All the music people who were there left or got fired, and they were replaced by more Hollywood type. Reality show producers, and the music equity of MTV kind of faded away. They do the music video awards once a year, but that's about it.
Is that a problem you see from your experience? And I saw this at Vice, and I've talked to everyone who at Vice about this, is that the desperate attempt of the old punk rock kids to professionalize, to make it more professional, it ultimately kills the business and makes it bland and like everything else.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, people have ambition.
Yeah.
You know, the ambition at our place was like we can make shows, we can make game shows, and we wanted to do soap operas, which was what the real world really was.
And remote control.
Remote control. Yeah, we made that for $15,000 a show.
Yeah.
It was the guys did it. They made a pilot in a basement of somebody's house.
Yeah, I wait here for about 5 hours. You'll see Colin Quinn, who would do a set early tonight.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
Yeah, Colin.
Well, you know, Colin Quinn was there, and Ken Ober, and then we brought in Adam Sandler. He used to be a stand-in guy on Remote Control. I just saw him in the new George Clooney film. He was wonderful.
And Ken Ober, rest in peace, who passed away fairly recently. Yeah,
but they had and what that did was allow us to get a toe into the New York City comedy community.
Yeah,
which helped us as we launched Comedy Central.
Yeah, was that so? Just because I'm reading this and I'm like, am I getting this right? That is, I know HBO had the idea of a comedy channel, and you with the Freston brashness were like, no, we're going to launch the same thing and fuck with them and compete with them immediately, even though you don't have an idea or a name. Right?
We didn't have an idea, but where did we? I mean, literally, I was in a meeting and someone slipped me a piece of paper and say, HBO's launching a comedy channel. It's going to be called The Comedy Channel. Yeah. And they're going to just rip scenes out of movies and shows and stand-up guys in front of brick walls. And we said, well, if HBO, they got all the money, they got all these Ivy League guys, and they're gonna, if they get in our business, if this thing works, they're gonna start a music channel and a kids channel and come after us. Why wouldn't they? They're in this pay TV space, and they had Robin Williams and George Carlin, and did all these big
HBO specials. Yeah.
So we said, well, let's take a dump on that, and why not? They're announcing it today. Let's announce one today ourselves. So every time they write about it, we'll be in the same article, even though we don't have a name or we don't even know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I called my boss, who used to work at HBO, and he said, yeah, let's do it. Let's have fun with these.
So is it fair to say that Comedy Central was created by you?
Well, created by my team.
The team creates it, but the idea, the germ of the idea is when you see that HBO thing and you're like, fuck it, we're going to do the same thing. You're the creator of it and they build it, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of willed from above, like with me, let's do it, yep. And then, we ended up, a guy, Doug Herzog, ended up running it for years, a guy named Larry Divney. And, I look at it today, because we had a big battle, we called it ourselves HA, the TV Comedy Network. We had to come up with a name 2 days later, because we just leaked we were doing it.
Chuckles with Tom Freston.
It was HA, the TV Comedy Network. We were going to run shows like, from various libraries. Saturday night, I got Saturday Night Lives and the old ones, and we were going to do that TV comedy. And we merged with HBO because everyone had spent a couple $100 million, and we became Comedy Central. It was a joint venture for a bunch of years until Time Warner was having a hard time and they had to sell it, and we bought the other half. But in that process, we had Doug Herzog come on board, and we've hired. You look at Bill Maher, Jon Stewart. John Oliver, Matt and Trey in South Park, Steve Carell, Stephen Colbert, Dave Chappelle. It's really the front line of sort of the comedy resistance today.
And it's not even that these are the funniest people on earth, and I think a lot of them are, but everyone you mentioned has been culturally incredibly significant. Whether it's South Park now giving a middle finger to the Trump administration and pissing them off, or Chappelle, during the time when, Netflix wanted to cancel his specials because he was being mean about certain groups of people, et cetera. And Jon Stewart's influence on the culture and on politics. This not just people making jokes. These are people that have a long shadow on the culture and on politics. It's kind of crazy how influential they've been.
Well, we were always looking for we were always an edgy place, and we were always looking for people with an edge, and they all kind of made the grade, but I think we were not a traditional company. We weren't a traditional corporation. They kind of felt comfortable there. Now they all left and went off to greater things. Yeah. And they became, as you say, sort of cultural warriors. Yeah. And I just feel proud today watching them all in their various incarnations.
Do you feel proud? Do you take a certain? I know this is asking for you to indulge in some pomposity and say, but you watch that stuff and you're like, man, I had a enormous influence on this stuff. You're sitting there, and you're like, maybe it was, happenstance, a lot of luck in life, but there's a lot of companies that come and go, a lot of channels that come and go, comics, bands, etc. The stuff that you've been associated with has really been successful in a very long-term way. And what kills MTV effectively, and it's after you've left, is just technological changes, things change, is going to happen. Did you ever think when you were writing this book and you were looking backwards, is like, do I have some special sauce? Is there something that I do that made all these things successful and made me such an influential player in media in the 20th century?
Yeah, not in a big way. I'm kind of a modest guy, not having a lot of self-reflection, but I realized that the traits I had developed, like in my years in Asia and before that, sort of want to be off the margins, out of the mainstream. I was the perfect kind of guy, not the perfect, but I was really ripe for running an edgy media company.
Personality-wise.
Yeah, personality-wise. I could attract talent like Judy McGrath or Doug Herzog. The people who worked for me on the team, we were like a family, and it was fun. I mean, we could do stuff that was purposeful. We could do stuff that was fun and pleasurable, and we could be wild. And people liked coming there. There would be I always said, if we could get the right creative people here, and there'd be a long line of people always wanting to come and work here, young people. Yeah. And I always put a creative person in charge of the networks. Generally in television, there's a salesperson or a business person, but I had someone that, because to me that would send a signal to the employees that creativity is our major aptitude. That's what we value the most. Yeah. And I would never speak to them about money or how much money we're making, but the creative successes that we had. And that when we were in this ascendant period, that worked really well. So I thought, we were able, and that went the same for the talent we were able to create, because people who worked for me in those positions had the same kind of personality profiles. Yeah. Everyone worked for Judy McGrath. Yeah. People like Doug. I mean, they were like right brain, left brain people.
Could you do it now, though? I mean, and we'll get to do a quick thing about Vice I'd like to ask you about, but you see that there's fun at Vice, and it's incredibly fun those early days. And then when the culture changed, that was the target. The fun was like, how dare you foster this culture, et cetera. And I'm reading this book, and I remember Kurt Loder say, like, I used to smoke in the office and drink. Like, he was very famous for smoking in his office. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. And I read this book, and it's like, hey, I just fucked somebody on your desk, and you're like, good job, not you, somebody else saying this. And I was like, oh, that's not 2025. I mean, could you have that leadership style now, or would you worry that that kind of culture is just not welcome anymore?
I think you can't do it. I mean, I just look at our Christmas parties. They were like, it's total fucking mayhem to go to 4 or 5 in the morning. I mean, people carrying on. We used to have I'll always remember the Studio 54 closed down, but they made it like an event space. Yeah. And if you ever went to Studio 54, there was a balcony. I remember some guy. People would fall off the balcony onto the main floor. They'd help him up, and he'd start dancing.
MTV Christmas parties?
Yeah, they were wild. We had these girls who were in like these little tiny outfits who had these, they had tequila bottles in their holsters, and they would carry, what do you call, things filled with bullets, but they're filled with
bandoliers.
Bandoliers filled with shot glasses. And they would roam around and just give people shots of tequila.
Yeah. Tom, why can't we do this again? Can we not?
No, we would never be able to do the stuff that went on.
I don't want the company. I just want the party. Let's just have the party, because that stuff now, I don't think HR, which is probably an acronym that didn't exist at MTV.
We actually had HR, and they were just as bad as everybody else.
I told a story in the piece that I wrote at Vice, which the editor said, I need you to tell me what the first HR guy that was hired at Vice, who was you maybe would remember him, I'll mention the name afterwards, but he was a very flirtatious gay man. And he said something to me that was so appalling that I was like, this is like my first week there. And my editor said, well, you got to put it in, what he said. And I told her, and he said, we can't put that in. It was like, that was the head of HR. So even when you're graduating into this idea that this is the new normal, nobody really adapted. That was a hard thing for us to do.
And I know it's that same sky's the limit, anything goes culture, free and fun. That's what attracted me to Vice years after I left MTV.
So Viacom, and I just want to have this one thing, I just want you to tell us one story we get to Vice, because my favorite thing about your career, and I know it's not a single bullet theory of why you were fired from, you were the CEO of Viacom, and the execrable Sumner Redstone fires you. But the greatest firing story of all time, and it's like, this should cement your reputation forever, and it was for not buying MySpace.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit, because I just can't believe that that's true. It's an amazing story.
Well, in the early 2000s, we were beginning to see the decimation of the media business by the digital guys.
Yeah.
And, all of a sudden, their stocks were going through the ceiling. Everybody's stocks were kind of flat.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? How do we morph into being a digital company? And then it became obvious to us. I mean, we weren't dumb. We saw what was coming, and it was, this is the case of MTV. People get videos on demand instead of waiting around to see Nirvana, whoever. So this social media stuff was interesting, because this is a whole new thing. This is a whole new thing. YouTube. First, when we met, we were the first people to ever talk to Facebook when they were only doing college students.
You had to have a .edu address. Yeah.
We had Mark Zuckerberg come in. He was 20. He was 20, and I remember he was wearing flip-flops and a hoodie, and it's New York in February, and he's younger than anybody on our staff, and their sales were $9 million.
Yeah.
And they had plans, and he was saying, we're thinking of opening up to high school students. We're not
told you that.
We're not going wide. We're thinking maybe we're discussing if this is a wise move. But we offered to buy them for like $1.5 billion. He turned us down.
$1.5 billion. They were producing about $9 million in revenue.
Yeah, but they had we saw potential there. That's what we had negotiated, and it would be $800 million. With the rest of it was in an earn-out.
Yeah,
but it didn't happen. So then we looked at YouTube, which was YouTube was going to be the new short form king. It started in 2005. You can upload video, tag it, and comment, share it with friends. Now all of a sudden, people can communicate with each other. You don't need gatekeepers anymore, which is what we are. So it's like, how do we get in on this?
Yeah.
So YouTube ultimately was sold to Google for $1.6 billion. It's now like the biggest thing in the world.
$600 billion or something.
$600 billion it's worth. It's gonna. It's just like but it was seen by my board as a copyright infringement machine.
Yeah, which it is too.
Which it was too. That's how they started. So we couldn't really touch it. And then we looked at MySpace. We kind of kicked the tires there.
Yeah.
And they were getting a lot of traffic from independent bands, and we would see like. For shows we had like the Hills, they had a lot more traffic on their website, a little section for the Hills than we were getting on our own. So we were talking to them, and there was a feeling. There had been another the first social network was called Friendster.
Yeah, I remember it very well. Yeah.
They went out of business. So we're thinking, is YouTube is MySpace going to go out of business? They're burning bright right now, but it's like I thought maybe it's like a nightclub where you're really kind of hot for a while, and people didn't pay to get in, and they can just go to the next one as it comes along. Yeah. So while we're talking, Rupert Murdoch comes in, and I'm on vacation with my family in Hawaii for a week, and he buys it overnight with no due diligence for $560 million. Yeah. Now Sumner Redstone, he hadn't even really heard of MySpace. He didn't know what was going on. We were talking to him. But it comes out that Rupert Murdoch's now on the cover of all the trade magazines as the new media, genius and visionary. Really annoyed Sumner Redstone. It was a stone in his shoe for a while. Compounded with some other stuff, he ultimately fires me on a Labor Day weekend when he liked to fire people. All my predecessors had been fired. He went on Charlie Rose and said, Freston had the prize and he lost it. I hate to lose to Murdoch. So in the end, Murdoch sells it after jamming it up with advertising and ruining it for $35 million to like Justin Timberlake or somebody.
Yeah, I mean, that was the biggest media flame. I mean, it wasn't quite Quibi, but it was like a media flame out like I've never seen. And I remember being in that building, which is on 6th Avenue where the Wall Street Journal is and Fox News is there and all the properties, and I can't remember if it was the 6th floor or something. It was just completely empty, and it was like that was the MySpace floor. It was like rent the space for MySpace because it was totally gone. But so you're gone from Viacom and you hook up with Vice, right?
I hooked up with Vice a couple years later. I went back to Afghanistan to work at this guy, Saad Mohseni's media company, which is interesting. I worked for Oprah for a while. she was launching a cable network. So I decided I didn't want to be grafted on top of another media company that I had no ownership on.
Yeah.
I'd have been somewhat spoiled. So I would do a bunch of different things with people I like. I worked with Bono of the One Campaign, anti-poverty group in Africa, which is an area I was focused on and interested in. And then one day Shane called me.
Yeah.
He texted me. I actually had, in my last months at Viacom, I did a deal with Shane because he came into my office. With Spike Jones brought him to me.
The vice guide to everything.
Eddie and Shane.
Yeah.
Because they were having trouble getting the attention of the people at MTV. And Shane, Spike has a great eye for talent. He brought us previously Johnny Knoxville and the Jackass crew, which was a whole other story. But anyway, Shane and Eddie were described to me as like we're like the truffle pigs of cool. They're doing all this cool stuff. They can operate really cheaply. They're online. They have a vision. And so they came in and they showed me their video. And they had one video of, they're going around Chernobyl with guns looking for werewolves. And then they had one with this guy, Sarouche, who was a partner.
At the gun market in Pakistan?
Gun market at Dar in Pakistan, where I had been years before. And I said, wow, these guys are really doing something new. And they're saying, we're going to be the next MTV. Yeah. And I'm thinking, well, we need to produce cheap content to put on the web, and my guys can't even produce cheap content anymore. Some of these people I'm working for me now have agents. It's crazy. Yeah. So I did a deal with it, and Shane's vision, I got to give him, he says, YouTube just started, and they're going to need content that's of quality. We can make quality content from the world's hotspots at a really low price. We're into it. We love it. Nobody else was coming in my office saying anything like this. So I said, let's do a deal. Because they had a magazine that got like 1 million or 2 million people, was distributed in skateboard shops or whatever. So we have all these people, and we're gonna start a journalistic enterprise. And so we did a 50-50 deal for the video part of Vice's business. And then I got fired. And then he had a big to-do. He didn't like the new management, this guy Philippe Dumont. So after I was gone, I guess 3 or 4 years, he said, hey, why don't you come out to Williamsburg? We'll have a drink. I'd like to see you. And in the meantime, in those intervening years, he had sort of become what he said he wanted to. They had a suite of channels on YouTube, making the craziest shit you could imagine. They were racking up huge views. He had this kind of culture around him of all these young guys with beards and gold rings, and they were on a
cult-like,
they were on a mission. It reminded me so much of the early days of MTV, where they only cared about, we're going to take over the world. Eddie Moretti and Sarouche, and you were involved early on there with them. And
I went up when I saw the same culture, which is what I recognized in the book, and from why I said the same thing about MTV the early days, is that I was in D.C. doing political journalism. Eddie came down, interviewed me, asked me to come up, hang out, and I went out with him and Shane one night. I was living in D.C., and I came up, and it was a blowout till like 5 a.m. It was the most fun I've ever had. Went to 5 different parties, and then they deposited me at the Bowery Hotel, and I was like, this is the life I want to live. This is the journalism that I want to do. It was so fun.
I had a version of that and it's in the book. I mean, my first night they took me to the box, and
that's where they took me to.
And when they pull up, it's like the president had come in, and they were like the kings. And we were in Williamsburg in some restaurant, and he was telling me, we employ more people in Williamsburg than anybody. Yeah. But then he went about hiring serious journalists. People were attracted to work there, and then they had this ad agency called Virtue. They were getting smart, like marketing people to come there. So it was exciting. And they said, come work for us. You know people, you can make connections. We need to raise money. We need to build a board. We need to meet people like at HBO and so forth. So I did.
And the HBO shows are successful initially. When did you start thinking this might be a bit wobbly? This might be in a kind of a foundation of sand in some ways. Did you have that feeling at any point?
They were like growing so fast. Yeah. At the same time, kind of missing their sales goals. They were great at making content. Yeah. I mean, they seemed to be so focused on making content, and Shane was good at that. It's particularly the HBO stuff really upped their game. I mean, but they were going everywhere. And when you looked at the end of the day, they weren't making that much margin on those shows because they would overspend to get them done right. And these were great Emmy-winning things, but it wasn't exactly a gold mine on the bottom line.
They weren't cheap either. I mean, I would do a piece, and I would go out and host a piece and I could get it greenlit, and I could go to Korea, South Korea, and overnight. And you look at the final, it'd be 150 grand, 200 grand for something like that. It wasn't run and gun with cameras anymore.
Yeah, they
expensive.
lost their low-cost, innovative production, sort of ethos, which had also had happened at MTV.
Yeah.
It's, I guess, it's sort of a natural progression. But then there was always this thing, we need more money, so they had to do another deal. And, there used to be these black cars rolling in from all these media companies. Look at Vice, man.
WPP and
everybody
and
came.
People,
Rupert Murdoch, Barry Diller, Time Warner, everybody came.
Bob Iger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they would do these deals, and tranches of monies would come in, and they would talk about expanding, and they expanded. But under the deck, it wasn't properly organized.
Yeah.
It wasn't properly organized, and it was hard to shake them by the shoulders and say, hey, man, you got to stop for a minute and get some good executives in here who could kind of put some order to the chaos. Wasn't done adequately, so
there were some bad executives that come in too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they had and here's the thing: you hire a bad executive. I used to see this. If you hire a bad executive, they may be nice people, but they're not great at this particular job. They're going to hire other bad executives.
But there was a point that Disney made an offer to buy Vice. And it would have made everybody a lot of money, and that didn't happen. Why didn't that happen? As somebody that would have made a little bit of money on that.
There's two of us.
Everybody. Yeah, but I'm still broke.
I mean, everybody from the top to the bottom had options.
Yeah, sure.
And there was going to be a payday. It was interesting to me because, in this era, everybody was building a company to sell it.
Correct, yeah.
That was the thing. You don't just build a company to keep running it and be sort of impervious to, your bottom line every year.
Yeah.
So, they wanted more, okay,
Shane, $3 billion, but I want $5 billion.
Shane was, he built this company, through the force of his personality and, blunderbuss. I mean, I can get more. I mean, he was a big gambler. So if you want to buy it for 3 and 5, I want more than that. And then someone who had been very happy at 3.5. Okay, I could plug this into a major media company and it could survive and do well. Now you want to renegotiate the deal. Now you want to renegotiate again. They just get tired. So that deal never happened.
Did you advise them to take that deal?
I was very excited about it. I remember I can't remember what year it was, but it was happening at a board meeting Disney was having in September. And they came back, no, we're not doing the deal. We're going to renegotiate it. And then Disney said, well, if you're going to renegotiate it, we're going to send in some people to see how you're doing. And let's see if you make your numbers.
Yeah.
Let's see if you can make your numbers this time around. So that this kind of melted away, and no other people really came forward with any offers to do it. And they were running out of money again, so they had to do a deal with this private equity company, TPG.
Yeah. Fierce,
solid, real business people, hard-nosed.
Yeah.
And as part of that deal, they would value the company at a high amount, but which Shane liked to say, that was good bragging rights. They say we're worth over $5 billion, but the money was essentially a loan, at 12%. So just the paying off of that loan put them in a bit of a
spiral, right?
Downward spiral.
Because that's the thing that when people, I would always chuckle when people say, "Oh, you work for Vice, $5, sometimes it would be $6 billion company," and I would just tell them, people who don't pay attention to this stuff, is that someone reports that once, right? Shane says that somebody reports it once, and every other journalist refers back to that report. As the Wall Street Journal reported, it's a privately held company. Nobody sees these books. Nobody has any idea what this is worth, how much of this is debt, how much of this is borrowed money, and it's a lot of borrowed time. But it was incredible to me how quickly that narrative solidified, because people liked that there was this upstart media company in Brooklyn with people with rings and beards and stuff, and they're worth $5 billion.
It was a great story.
It's a great story.
People were waiting for that because they were already bored with these big, conglomerates. Here's an independent, spunky company, and they're worth money, and they're doing it their own way. But it really wasn't. If you looked under the hood, there was problems in River City.
But final question about Vice is, you had fun during it, though, didn't you?
It was great. I mean, look, I got a little. Yeah, I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed their can-do. And here's the thing, they hired a lot of smart people there.
Sure.
They had real journalists there. You were there. There were other people. They were going into all these spots. They were making stories that no one else was making. The HBO series, which ran for 5 years, and they had the Daily Show.
Yeah.
I mean, it was what really put Vice on the map. Everyone stood up and saluted. Look at these guys. They're doing stuff, ABC, NBC. They actually have international, it looked like we had international bureaus. So it was heady. And
that was
fun.
always my joke to Shane. He would say, yeah, they're all closing bureaus all over the world, the AP, Reuters, and we're opening them. And I would say, Shane, the kid named Pavel in his mother's basement in the Czech Republic isn't necessarily a bureau. Right. But he could sell that stuff. He was very good.
He would start, we're going to have Vice networks in all these different countries, but that was kind of BS too.
I mean, the cable thing that they did with Spike was a very odd. I thought there was some brilliant idea that I didn't understand as a lowly journalist, that going back into what appeared to be a kind of dying market when people were cord cutting, that let's start a cable network. And I was, is this the best idea right now? I'm like, well, Spike's there and he's a brilliant guy. And I don't know what's happening, but it seemed to me that maybe that was a bad idea too.
Yeah, that wasn't a great idea.
All right, Tom Freston, the book is Unplugged Adventures from MTV to Timbuktu. It's a fantastic book, and you're the only person I know that can somehow have Bono, Walter Isaacson, Fab Five Freddy, and Pico Iyer all blurb the book.
They all like the book.
That is a life well lived. Just the blurbs. Tom, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Michael. Great to be here. Good to talk to you.